Hey ladies, we're gonna touch on some glute strengthening exercises. One that I love in particular is the bridge. There are two different ways to do this exercise, one being a regular bridge exercise, and then the next one being a single leg bridge exercise. The single leg is definitely harder, so it's a progressive exercise, not one that I would begin with, but one that I would start to do as I got stronger with the glute exercise. One thing to keep in mind, you want to make sure you've done the hip mobility exercises before going into or while doing the glute exercises, especially while you're progressing in from a double leg glute exercise into a single leg. It's very important to stay on top of those glute mobility. And when I say hip mobility, and the hip mobility exercises were the 90-90 sitting, really getting in and stretching out that tissue, guys, because what happens is our glutes get really nice and tight, our hips get nice and tight with pregnancy and postpartum. And so spending about 2 minutes a day in that hip mobility video is very beneficial, especially if you're going to work on strengthening. The reason behind that, the glutes, we want the lengthen, we want the range of motion so that that glute can work through a full range of motion, just like the pelvic floor, to build up strength and stability for you. If it's tight, the muscle's not going to be able to work for full functioning and full strength. So we want to make sure the hip mobility stuff is going along with the glute strengthening exercises. Okay, so now let's go into the bridge exercise. Go ahead and lay on your back. And you're gonna have your knees bent with this one. The biggest mistakes that I see here, guys, for women is people will tend to hold their breath when they lift up, or they tend to bear out, or they tend to use their hamstrings. So a couple of things I like you to keep in mind. When you do the glute exercise, you want the ankle to be below the knee with this one. You wanna think about blowing out as you go. You want to squeeze your butt, and you can even do a little bit of hip bone to hip bone with this here too. So tightening hip bone to hip bone. But the biggest key, blow as you go and squeeze your butt. If you start to feel a hamstring tightness or a hamstring pull, you're probably not squeezing your butt enough. Okay, so let's go through this. I'm gonna have you inhale. You're gonna blow out, squeeze that butt, tighten hip bone to hip bone as you lift. Another mistake that I see here is women will arch up too much where this is stretching out and this is starting to curve. We really want to keep you in a nice straight line here and come back down. So you're going to breathe in and tighten hip bone to hip bone, squeeze that butt, nice straight line, and back down. And again, I'm tightening my butt, tightening hip bone to hip bone, and not overarching the belly. All right, guys, so now we're gonna go into single leg bridge. So this is gonna work on one side. This is particularly harder for women who have had a C-section due to the core and the pelvic floor really not working well. For me, it was very hard to do on one of my legs, and I could definitely tell weakness there. People who've had a vaginal birth will probably or may notice the same thing too, especially if they were dealing with more hip pain, low back pain during pregnancy as well. So with the single leg, you're going to keep your legs here. One of the legs is going to extend out, but it's still going to stay even with the opposite thigh. So you're still going to blow as you go, tighten the butt, and tighten hip bone to hip bone as you do this exercise. So again, blow as you go. Ready, and go. Breathe in and blow out. And back down. Squeeze that butt as you go up. And one more. And back down. So you're going to switch legs and extend it out, keeping those thighs even. Remember to exhale as you go up, squeeze your butt, and tighten hip bone to hip bone. Breathing in and out. Remember to squeeze your butt. And one more. Okay, so with the single leg bridge, the goal is to be able to do at least 10 in a row. So if you're not able to do that in the beginning, then you want to try to maybe do 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, 2 on one side, 2 on the other side, really working up to 10 in a row. Then if your goal is to get back to more of a higher intensity type exercise, so we've got hip movements, we've got running, jumping, maybe even fast-paced walking, any of that stuff. We want to try to get 20 in a row of those, guys. But remember, that's not holding your breath. It's really blowing out, squeezing the glutes, and then tightening hip bone to hip bone. And remember, that contraction is very minimal. It's not a tighten everything where you can't blow out. Really want to make sure blowing out, squeezing the butt, gentle hip bone to hip bone exercise. So goal initially 10 in a row, another goal 20 in a row, and a goal is not to be met that day or the next day. Really give yourself time to build up to that. Okay, so that is the glute bridge and glute single leg bridge. That is the progression of the glute bridge. So give that a try and let me know if you have any questions.